Hey, everybody, and welcome to today's episode of Learning from the Pros. Joining me today is Deivis. He is the founder of DERU Digital, and he's going to be sharing his 10 tips around Google Ads and making it work for your SaaS brand. Welcome, Deivis.
Hey, and thanks for having me. I hope these 10 tips are going to be useful.
I'm pumped. Why don't we just start off with a quick background on yourself and what you do?
Sure. I've been working in performance marketing and my career started in Google Ads. So I worked like full time for 6 years. And on the side, I also freelanced. And then eventually, as of like 1.5 years ago, I decided it's time to create an agency. So been an agency owner now for a little bit over a year now. So I know a thing or two about Google Ads and paid in general.
Nice. That's awesome. So paid, is like a topic near and dear to everyone's hearts here at Conversion and what we do best. And Google Ads, specifically in the SaaS world, is arguably the most invested channel in relation to other ones. I know LinkedIn is definitely getting more steam, but when you look at overall investments by budget, search is typically still the greatest. So I'm sure the tips you're going to share today are going to be super helpful for everyone listening at home. So why don't you kick us off, Deivis, with your first tip?
Perfect. So the number one tip is, and I think everybody's telling you that, is quality conversion tracking. And what I mean is that you don't only track form submits, but you also incorporate something called offline conversions. So those are usually what you track from in your CRM. So different lead stages, basically, right? So we all know that you can get a ton of form fills, but not all of them are going to be of quality. So what you need to do is then whatever stages you have, be it MQL, SAL, opportunities, try to upload it all back to Google because first of all, you give Google more data points, so it's easier for Google to optimize. And also, you can also tell Google which sessions, which keywords are more valuable. So you can use either maximize conversion strategy or maximize conversion value. So if you set different values for different conversion points. So that's number one for sure.
Quality conversion tracking. Talk me through that a little bit. So feeding Google better signals to better optimize for you. So getting all of your lifecycle stages pushed into Google Ads. So it'll look a little different for every company. But the idea is you want to make sure you have that information in the platform. So then Google knows the difference between a lead, an MQL, and SQL, right? And then more importantly, you yourself can then use that information to actually optimize and make the necessary adjustments, right?
Exactly. Yes.
Cool. And in terms of setting up quality conversion tracking, are there any like hiccups you see brands run into in terms of like preventing them from doing that?
I think the biggest one is Salesforce. So HubSpot has like really easy integrations. I think it's trickier when you have Salesforce because then you need to like put timestamps on different stages. So if you have an MQL, you need to do some orchestration on Salesforce. I personally like don't know how to technically do that. I just know that it needs to happen. So then I basically instruct the RevOps teams of our clients, okay, please put timestamps on these on these MQLs and also include the gclit IDs because you need gclit IDs associated with the conversion to be able to upload. So with HubSpot, it's less kind of an issue. It's more that with Salesforce. In some cases, like we can't even maybe automate that. With HubSpot, it's just directly there, syncing done. So it might involve also manual uploads. And who wants to do that? Who can remember doing that? So I think that's the issue. And frankly speaking, some even don't know that you can do that.
Yeah, 100%. It's like for everyone listening, this is where marketing operations support is going to be really helpful. If you are a lean, scrappy team and you're like, hey, I don't have a MOPS person, I'm a one person marketing manager doing everything, and I've got to do this now as well. Just recommend going to Upwork and just finding someone. There's a ton of people out there that you can find on Upwork relatively affordably, and they know how to do this stuff with their eyes closed. And on the technical side, it's pretty straightforward. Like the biggest thing is just capturing the Google Click ID, like Deivis is talking about. So if you're using HubSpot, HubSpot does it automatically with their pixel, and then using HubSpot forms to automatically capture the click ID and then push it through HubSpot, and then you can set up the events. If you're not as fortunate and you're using Salesforce, then you have to replicate that process manually. So essentially you can go on Upwork and you can find a developer that can install a JavaScript through Google Tag Manager that can capture the click ID and then pass it through your hidden fields for whatever form you're using. and then pass it into your CRM. So it's just an extra step, and you're going to get that JavaScript created by the developer, but you can do it relatively cheap if you go to Upwork and find someone. But 100%, I totally agree with you. Like, quality conversion tracking is like the one step that everyone hears and they know they need to do, but most don't actually do it.
Yeah, exactly. And also you can do a bunch of interesting things then. I mean, depending on how much volume you get, maybe you can then eliminate optimizing for form fills, and then you can start optimizing only starting from MQL stage. So you give Google just better kind of signals to optimize towards instead of just form fills. So there's a bunch of things you can play around with. And if you're fortunate enough and you get a lot of SALs, you can optimize towards SALs, right?
Yeah, 100%. All right, tip number 2.
Tip number 2 is consolidation. And what I mean by that is you don't need to have 20 campaigns, and you don't need to have 300 ad groups and have thousands of keywords. And mainly because, especially in B2B, we don't usually get a lot of data points. So when you scatter that all around through on between like multiple campaigns, it gets really hard for the algorithm to optimize, and also for you to keep track of what's happening in the account. Besides, we all know that SCAG structure is long gone. Nobody's using that. At least I think nobody's using that anymore, as we did like a better part of like 4 or 5 years ago. And also, exact match is not exact anymore. So there's no point in having the same keyword in 7 variations. You can just have one, and all of those variations are going to be triggered there anyways. So I don't think it makes sense to overblow the complexity and structure of Google Ads, to be honest.
This is a good
What do you
one.
think?
Yeah, I 100% agree with you. And it's something that personally I was reluctant to try. And then eventually I got on board. I was like, okay, because I definitely like I come from like old school Google Ads where it's like you control everything, you give Google no choice, it's like literally everything you do yourself, like you're setting bid adjustments, like, just complete control. But you're absolutely right. Like nowadays, it's not so much anymore about the campaign structure side of things and like having like 7,000 variations of campaigns for the same keyword. It's more so about having fewer campaigns that are more impactful, and then having as many quality conversion signals by campaign. So then now you can leverage automated bidding and take advantage of all that conversion track you're taking advantage of. And then also just makes your life easier, like you talked about, right? On the account management side, if you have 20 campaigns to manage versus 200, it's going to make a big difference on the day to day.
Yeah, I mean, trust me, my first job was at Momondo, and we had hundreds of campaigns. And when Kayak acquired Momondo, we started to create single keyword campaigns, not even single keyword ad groups. So can you imagine how many campaigns we had? It's insane. So I come from that background where we wanted to control everything. So I was reluctant at first as well to like consolidate more, because again, to your point, I also wanted to control everything. But unfortunately, we are losing the control, right? Anyways, so let's work with Google, not against 100%. It to a certain extent.
It's interesting to see how like over the years it's kind of played out, and it's getting more and more and more. It's like I wouldn't be surprised if one day it's just Performance Max and that's it. Like you have,
and I hope not.
I mean, I hope not. I hope not too, but like that's like the trend, like fast forward, I don't know, 5 years from now.
Yeah.
If Google just says one day, they're like, hey, like I remember like it was yesterday with broad match modifier. Remember, like we're sunsetting broad match modifier. And then they moved us to like towards the exact phrase, and then it's the full broad. And to your point, like exact is not even exact anymore. So you're trying to bid on this one keyword here, and you think you're showing up for CRM software as exact match, and you're really showing up for something completely unrelated.
Yeah,
it's great.
Exactly. That is very annoying. I'll be honest.
Yeah, 100%. Check your search terms report, people. All right. Tip number 3.
Which leads us to what we just talked about, is exclusions. So no, exact is not exact anymore. And like, it's weird, but I start to think that exclusions now are more valuable or more important than inclusions. So instead of like trying to add like hundreds of keywords, think of ways how you can exclude hundreds of keywords, because these variations are going to be triggered all the time. Even like there are some subtle things. For example, there's a company who has a tool, and some of the keywords that I bid on are customer journey tracking, which is relevant, but it triggers customer journey mapping. And that's, for some reason, is not relevant. There are nuances even on that level, and it's exact match. So you need to keep track on what are the search terms that you are showing up on. The downside is also that Google still hides a lot of search terms, right? That makes it a bit harder to exclude, but I know there are scripts out there somewhere on LinkedIn where people are creating like these complex scripts that you can implement that basically sends you on Slack like based on n-grams. We've noticed this pattern, these kind of terms, search terms that are containing this specific word has never converted in the last 6 months. Then you can assume that you could technically exclude all of these from your search terms. But it always is really like nuanced, because in longer sales cycles and big B2B accounts, you can't really exclude just based on no conversions, because they still can be very relevant, and it takes only one opportunity to make that all cost make sense, right? But overall, exclusions, you need to be on top of it.
Yeah, pro tip on this tip here is, for everyone listening, just go to Google Ads, go to the reporting section, and then create a search terms report and schedule it to whoever needs to see it. And it's like an easy, free way for you to just get access and visibility into the search terms that are coming through in your account. And then you can get it emailed to you every week on a Monday, whatever your cadence is. And then you can just see what's coming through. So if there are certain things that you're like, hey, we shouldn't be spending money on that, this is a good tip too. If you have like an agency or somebody else managing your ads and you want more visibility on how everything looks, to give you that foresight. All right, tip number 4.
I think this is an obvious one, so I'm not going to talk a lot about it, but you should have fast and relevant landing pages. I will start with the fast one. Fast, well, Google's basically going to damage your quality score if you don't have a fast website. That's just obvious. And then relevancy or is basically if you split out the campaigns on different ad groups, you should try to get the landing page of that ad group to be as closely tied to the keywords that you have in that ad group. For obvious reasons, of course, because high relevance, high conversion rates, and also Google will like you more as well in terms of quality score. Not everybody can create multiple landing pages, and that is what it is, but you don't need to overcomplicate it. So what we've told also some of our clients is, especially when they start out, they say, well, it's going to take us a long time to develop these extra landing pages. And I just tell them, just change the hero kind of section, keep everything else as is, for example, and we can just duplicate, if it's in WordPress or whatever other CMS, just duplicate the page and we can just adjust the hero section, and that's it. We don't need to really overcomplicate it, at least at the start. And then you can start playing around on highest volume landing pages, because again, if we follow Pareto, it's like 80-20 principle, right? You should try to adjust the ones that you get the most volume and conversions. Then you can start to play around a little bit more and do kind of micro adjustments, so to speak. But as a start, fast and relevant landing pages is something that you should definitely do.
I think it's a great tip and something everyone should take seriously, because we do have a tendency to overanalyze, and you want to have everything perfect from the start, and like just reminding yourself, hey, like can you just take what you already have today, duplicate it, make variations to the content, so it's very, just make the message match a little bit better above the fold in the hero section, and match better with the campaigns. And then it's like, it's not ideal, but it's better than what you had before. And then you can, at least that's like a starting point. And then, you can kind of move on from there. Now you have some data, to your point, like where now you can lean in based on the 80-20 and versus just your assumptions. Now you know which landing pages are generating majority of the conversions that you can work on, or vice versa, or the ones that are getting the majority of the clicks that you should work on, and then kind of prioritize your efforts.
Yeah, exactly. And especially the 80-20 run, right? I mean, you don't even know yet before you launch what is going to get volume. So overcomplicating it and perfecting the landing pages that maybe nobody's going to ever see, because nobody's going to click on those ads. Nobody's going to search for those terms. So definitely just get something out there.
Totally. All right. Tip number 5.
And that kind of ties back to what we started at the beginning, basically leveraging smart bidding. And that is about what we talked, that we are kind of giving away our control, because I know still there are a lot of kind of managers who want to do manual bidding, thinking that they can do better adjustments on a daily basis. But do they really? I mean, I think it's really hard if you think about it. Like there are multiple levels that goes into the auction, your geo, your device, in market, whatever. Like there's so many things that you can do adjustments on. It's not just the CPC bit that you can adjust and or create rules. I mean, we could debate if Google is really taking all of that into account. I want to believe they do. And in general, I just think smart bidding is going to do a way better job than if we're going to try to do it manually. I know that there are instances where you simply don't get the conversion volumes, so you can't really leverage smart bidding. Those would be the only exceptions, but that also would mean that you have relatively little budget, because if you cannot get conversions in, why would you spend 50K a month on it? So that would be kind of an exception. What's your take?
I agree with you. I think one area that is interesting is around the conversion volume. I'm curious your experience with this. I know Google has recommendations of like 15 to 30 conversions a month per campaign, ideally for leveraging automated bidding and smart bidding. Do you have, in your experience, like, do you have a threshold of, let's say you're starting a new campaign and a new account and you're starting from zero. Are you confident enough in the automated bidding where you'll start with something like max conversions or target CPA, or will you kind of ease into it with something else?
If I start out, I usually try to do either manual or max CPC. Yeah, maximum clicks, sorry. Which basically is going to inflate like the traffic quite a lot, and it's not going to convert that well, but it's going to give me some sort of like benchmark, some sort of threshold to understand where is the volume, in which campaigns, which keywords, what I need to adjust, and if there is a potential for conversions. So I can also then eliminate some of the things that I see, okay, these keywords are really getting a lot of volume, but I could already tell that maybe the intent is not there really, and maybe they're not going to convert that well. So I can immediately do some adjustments there. And then I switch to maximum conversions, because I think if you start with maximum conversions, and I've done that in the past as well, there is a chance where if it doesn't get the conversions in the first few days, it might also die off. I've experienced that as well, which doesn't really happen that often, but I've seen that. So if you just start out, I would try manual or max clicks and then switch whenever you get those first conversions in. Now, my threshold for conversions, I also agree that there needs to be like what Google said, like 30 and whatever. It's great to have, but like in B2B, very often I see less. And then I'm like, okay, 10 is good enough for maximized conversions, depending on how many campaigns you have as well. Obviously, if you can have it on campaign level, 10 in campaign level, I think in some cases that's already good, especially if I go for like, if I have an enterprise client. 10 per week would be good, to be honest. And then I would still try to leverage maximize conversions. And also you could do it on a portfolio level. So then portfolio would then learn on all the campaigns, not individually. So that might help as well if you still need to split the campaigns, because budget-wise, right, if you target the whole world, you would want to split out North America, EMEA, Australia, whatever, right? And one is for mainly for budget reasons, but also because the CPCs vary per region a lot, and also I would assume deal sizes. So there are reasons why you do the splits as well regionally.
Yep.
But it's hard to say the threshold. It's nuanced.
I totally agree with your thinking. It's tough, and like that's why I was genuinely curious, because like on in my experience as well, and the test that we ran, there is no real number. It's so subjective. Like, for example, we have some campaigns that, but generally speaking, like if you're running on a brand new campaign and it has 0 conversions, the safest way to start is exactly that. It's like max clicks with a bid cap or manual CPC. And then you kind of staircase, you get some volume, and then you make the switch with a 50-50 campaign experiment if you want to be really conservative. If not, you just roll out the change. And that's been true for us as well. But it's been interesting because like the challenge with max conversion bidding is sometimes if you do it too soon, it'll just destroy your CPCs. Like yes. I have seen Google set the cost per click from like $30 to like $125 a click. And it's just painful, it's really painful. But on the flip side, there are often times too where it does extremely well, and it drives more volume. So there is something to smart bidding. Like we have a client recently where they were struggling with volume, and it was a constant challenge. Like every day it was like, hey guys, like we had 2 leads today. How do we get to 5? And it was like, that was like our daily target. And we were constant, like, it was like that internal challenge. And for us, what did it was switching towards max conversion value bidding. Like that did it. Like there was something to it. Google's algorithm is like now actually attuned. They're trying to find people who have more propensity to convert, and making that shift has been successful for us and did allow us to drive more volume in the account
Nice.
by just making the bid strategy change. But on the flip side, there's other clients where you try it and it's like, an atomic bomb on the
Yeah, yeah.
CPC prices.
One way,
Yeah.
one workaround is that you could do is do portfolio bidding with a CPA, and then you put a cap on it, on CPC cap. But then if you want to mimic the max conversion, you need to set really high CPA. It's kind of like tricking Google to thinking that you can maximize it, but you have this absurd price per conversion that you could reach potentially. In some cases, I've seen that to be successful. In some cases, it's just stupidly reaches that goal, which is not great. So then it overspends a lot. I've been long enough into this to understand that there's never one way that is always going to work. Like every situation, every campaign, every client, every region is going to have different scenario. So it's kind of like you can have your best practices, but your best practices, they're actually like, for the same situation, they're like 10. And now you need to understand which best practice is going to work for you.
Yeah. 100%. 100%. All right. Tip number 6.
I think everybody needs to chill out with the responsive search ads for ad group. What I mean is that I've seen accounts when we do audits where they literally are spending sub 10,000 per month, but every single ad group that they have has 3 responsive search ads. Think of how many combinations now Google has to come up with that ideal ad that's going to win the auction. 45, 12 description lines. It's infinite amount of combinations. You're not doing anything good for the Google Ads algorithm. So I've seen cases where all I did is decrease, like in a bigger accounts where they're spending like 70,000+ per month. I just went in and just started to pause all the responsive search ads. Well, not all, but just keeping one. CTRs went up and conversion rates increased. It's just, it seemed like the Google's algorithm was not as confused anymore. So it was starting to work with what it has and making better combinations. So I think just people need to relax, have one, maybe 2. If you have a ton of volume, you can potentially put 3. Maybe there are occasional ad groups that has a ton of volume. There you can have 1, like 2 or maximum of 3. No, you cannot go really more than 3. But then you have other ad groups that are getting maybe like 30 clicks per week. Just keep one responsive search ads there. I've seen cases where I even started to think that if you don't have enough volume, you don't even need to maximize 15 headlines. And I always thought that you absolutely should, because it's best practice. But if you get, 35 clicks a week, can it really figure out which combinations work? Because if you look at when you look at the performance of certain headlines, in those smaller accounts, I sometimes see for months that some of the headlines are not getting impressions and says learning. So they never get a chance to even get in that variation. So I'm even starting to think that you should have, even in some cases, less than 15.
That's a really interesting tip. I like that. I don't think that's something that's talked about often, which I think is a really solid tip. And it's interesting too, because the thing that it got me thinking about as well, outside of that, is especially with Google Ads, like with paid social, for the most part, most people are pretty aware and they're cute in the sense of the fact that, I need to be testing, I need to be pausing old ads, I need to be rotating new creatives in. Paid search, it's like I wrote that thing once 6 months ago and I never looked at it again, and that's it. And to your point, like they'll create as many variations possible. They'll like maximize the amount of character counts, all the variations of headlines and positions. And then they'll like check it off and then they walk away and then they never think about their ads again. So there's definitely something to that for sure. That's a really good tip. All right. So I think we are now on tip number 7.
Yes. Also closely related to responsive search ads. Google Ads doesn't like pinning. When you look at the quality that I say, if it's strong or medium or whatever, once you start pinning the headlines, it immediately tells you it's not strong enough anymore for some reason. I don't know why Google does that, but we do like pinning because we want to have some sort of control of how the ad copy looks like. I basically try to divide it in 3 parts. Part one is your headline one will be closely related to your keyword. If you want to, you can write different 5 variations of the keywords that are in your ad group, or you can also leverage keyword insertion as well. That typically gets you an increase in CTR. Harder to control, especially when you want to like capitalize some extra letters. So for example, AI, with keyword insertion, it will capitalize the word, the A, but not I, and it might look weird, so you need to see if it makes sense. In headlines too, I tend to put like unique selling points or social proof or something else, something a bit different that is not as dry as your keyword in the headline one. And then headline 3 potentially could be either your homepage or the kind of company name or CTA or even like the website. All right. And you can also try to put maybe sometimes the CTA in headline 2. But to be completely honest, when I do the analysis of headlines, CTAs always flop. Like when I have like book a demo, free something, it's always like Google's pushing it down. And the only way we can analyze the performance is based on how many impressions they're getting, right? And I always see it at the bottom. It always gets least of the impressions for some reason. I don't know why Google does
Yeah.
that. It gets probably some data points to see like when you have that CTA in the ad, people don't click. I don't know. I noticed it's across many accounts. So I'm curious to see if you see the opposite.
No, I agree with your thoughts too around pinning 100%. Like we completely disregard ad strength. It has no bearing on ad rank whatsoever. It's just Google's best practices on what they want you to do. But at the end of the day, ad rank is your max bid times quality score times the expected impact of ad extensions, as ad rank is nowhere in that formula. So I would just tell people like rest easy. Like don't freak out if you're using pinning. Totally agree as well with like the way you think about pinning. We do the same thing. Like the goal of headline 1 is just to answer and provide like message match to like whatever somebody's searching, you know? So like you answer the what question, like what is this link about? So, you know, they're searching CRM software. You have CRM software in your headline 1. And then headline 2 is to differentiate yourself against everybody else in the search results page. So why should I click on this link compared to everyone else? And then finally, the headline 3 is that CTA. What I'm noticing is the CTA, the reason it's getting the least impressions is because it's just not being shown. And what I mean by that is like Google's starting to just show like the H1 position on its own, or just the H1 and the
That's true.
H2. They're not really pushing the H3 anymore as much, it's interesting. Like it used to be H1, H2, H3. Now I barely see the H3 ever. And now it's always H1, H2. And then oftentimes now I'm starting to see just H1, which is interesting how like they're kind of like condensing it even more.
Yeah, they're putting the headline 2 in the description at the beginning of the descriptions. That's what I'm noticing. It's not that they just keep it as headline 1, they're just putting it down for some reason. That's weird.
Yeah, 100%. So at the end of the day, they're going to show your ads however you see fit. And like, if you're not pinning, you're just increasing the probability of like having illegibility within your ads, you know?
Yeah.
And for those of you that like people listening that they're like, I want to have the benefit of pinning, but I also want to give Google flexibility. This is like where pinning each position, but having multiple variations per position is helpful. So now Google has like 2 to 3 variations of H1s, 2 to 3 variations of H2s. And then I honestly don't even bother with the H3 anymore. Like now I just do 1 variation and that's it, because I just know it's not going to be seen. And I just spend like 90% of my time on the H1 and like 10% of my time on the H2. And that's like the 80-20 in terms of like Google Ads headlines. And you can have those multiple variations per position. So now when Google is rotating your different positions, figure out what works, they're doing it within this controlled order. So at the end of the day, your ads are still legible, because ultimately, like that's the biggest mistake people run into without pinning is their ads become illegible. It just doesn't make sense. Like you're like redundant, you're repeating yourself. You're like best CRM software in like position 1. And then position 2 is like the ultimate CRM software. I don't know. Like, you know, like, okay, you know, you just wasted so much context. But yeah, totally agree. This is a big one, and I hope you will take that seriously. All right, tip number 8.
A relatively small one, but I think that's something that people shouldn't forget is don't forget about device adjustments. They work with smart bidding as well, there are adjustments that don't work. I think it was like audience and some other ones that are not really working with bid strategies, if I'm not mistaken. At least it wasn't working in the past. But the bid adjustments on device level are still something that smart bidding takes into account. And usually what happens is people just decrease tablets and mobile devices. And you do that based on CPAs. Yes, we can go into all argument of, but what if we get a lot of quality for mobile or whatnot? Are we? I mean, what are the chances? It's you look at the blended CPA. You don't look at per which conversion type you're getting. And often what I see is that you get to decrease the device adjustments between like 30 to 50%. In some cases, even 70. It's just that those are not converting at the same pace as desktop. And I think that's no surprise to anyone. Of course, some people might bring up that, yeah, but what if they're researching on the phone and then they're converting on desktop from direct or whatever? It could be, but we need to work with the
Yeah,
data that we have.
totally. Yeah. At the end of the day, just see what your data tells you and then decide for yourself, right? And if you need to like add a negative bid adjustment on a certain device, you can. But that's a good point. And I think people often forget that is you have control around where your ads can display on which devices. And take advantage of it, especially if you have a product that's like not mobile optimized or your capture process is pretty poor on mobile and you're driving a lot of traffic there. It's like, are you really setting yourself
Exactly.
up for success? And then you can make that choice for yourself.
Do you remember
All
the
right,
days
tip.
where do you remember the days where campaigns were split by device? That's madness.
Yeah, I do 100%. We still do them as well,
Oh,
like, but like on very, very rare circumstances. Like, for example, like we had one client where they ran this whole campaign and it was like a really unique landing page and it was like this experience and it was on mobile that they were running the campaign. So like little things like that. Or like for another client of ours, what we did was we captured the device modifier through their value track parameters and their
yeah.
tracking template. And then we could report in the CRM, like, is mobile doing better than desktop and so on and so forth. And in that client specific example, like mobile was actually crushing it for them. So we were like, okay. And then the challenge was because we had desktop and mobile in the same campaign, because the budget lives at the campaign level, Google was just naturally pushing more budget towards mobile. And we wanted to make sure that desktop was getting its fair share. So we split it.
Yeah.
But this is kind of like where you're making these data back decisions. And like to your point earlier, it's like whatever your best practice is, it's like it's all circumstantial depending on the account and like the context and everything, you know? Because like in those instances, like we're doing the obsolete thing, you know, in like Google Ads
Yeah.
today. But in that instance, it's like, oh no, this is actually makes perfect sense, you know?
Yeah. That's exactly
All
true.
right. Tip number 9.
Less of a tip, more of a thing to think about. Bid on a brand, bid on your own brand, or not bid on your own brand. There's a lot of discussions around this, and I think the best way to determine that is first, are people bidding on you? And if the answer is yes, then you should probably protect your brand. Of course, and now a lot of arguments come into play where if you have an enterprise level product, are you really going to lose the client, like potential kind of closed one based on someone else bidding on your brand? They're looking for you. So they're going to, of course, look for you and click organically. But what if not? Do you want to leave it up to chance? Like, to be honest. And speaking of like back when I worked at Momondo, like my biggest reason why I always try to put key brand is we in one of the markets, one of the biggest revenue driver keyword was a competitor term. Now, fast forward 2.5 years, we got acquired by that company, and their policy was not to bid on brand. And then we showed you, hey guys, you lost this amount of money on us because of us, and it was your brand. And the policy changed, so we started to include brand terms across the world just to protect ourselves. But it's a bit different. It's B2C, so there people are easier to be swayed away to convert on someone else, right? Even though they search for some other company. There's still debate on if that's really happening on B2B. That being said, I still see closed one on our clients as well on competitor terms, meaning it does work. So if it works on my competitor campaigns, it must work on other competitors as well. So I would say try to bid on your own terms just to protect that.
Yeah,
What's your
one
approach?
quick You and I are like 100% the same page. One quick, like the way I think about it at the end of the day is if I'm torn, so like we have this one client, and this one client is, I mean, they're massive. Like they have like a 400K a month ad budget. They're like across like global, really big account. They're spending like 6 figures on branded search. And when we first took over the campaign, we like to set benchmarks and thresholds for ourselves where we're like, okay, ideally, we don't want more than 20% of the overall account's budget going towards brand. Like we want to be reaching net new prospects. We want to be on the offense. Like that's generally like the motto we take. Well, with this account, it was like 40-ish% of their budget was on branded search. So that was like a red flag for us. So we talked to them. We're like, hey guys, like you're probably overspending here. And they told us, because they've been, this is like an established brand. They've been running ads forever. They're like, no. Like we're telling you, we're reaching new people. We're getting new trial signups from brand. So what we did just to validate this, and also for like my sanity, was we ran a holdout study. So in their case, they couldn't afford to not run brand in the US. So we basically did this like in some like less impactful geos, like if there's fluctuation in volume. So what we did was we turned off brand in those geos, and then we monitored the amount of net new trials coming through in that specific region after pausing brand compared to when it was on. And then we made the comparison. And in their case, we found brand was actually driving net new acquisition. We were losing new customers by not having brand versus having it. So when in doubt, run a holdout study and just figure it out for yourself and see what the data tells you.
That's a good approach for sure.
Awesome. All right. I know we are coming up on time here. So we've got tip number 10.
Tip number 10 is reporting side. Always report on brand versus non-brand when you report and when you evaluate performance of Google Ads. It's clear and it's obvious that brand campaigns are gonna overperform vastly compared to non-brand campaigns. So, and it happens also a lot on agencies where they want to inflate their impact on the accounts. So they blend it all together. So it looks like you're generating a lot. And I also had a client that we work with, and we started to see these increases in demos and whatnot. And I was like, guys, relax. I still need to do because it's Salesforce and not, I still need to do the separation. And I'm going to then only tell you if it's really me that is driving it all, because I would say it's me only if it's from non-brand. And exactly, I mean, there was an uptick in non-brand as well, but the majority share came from brand, meaning that something else happened. Something else was really good in their marketing mix that started to drive people to search for their brand. So I think that's a big one to always keep them separate, because it's really not Google Ads that is doing the conversion on brand. Of course, as you mentioned now, you still can drive net new, but in general, I like to separate them out because it really skews how much you are investing, because you cannot scale brand. Like you cannot really scale them. It's not like, okay, what if we're going to invest now 2 times more? Well, if you are having like a huge share of your inbounds from brand, you will invest two times more. You'll definitely not going to get 2 times more conversions or 2 times more from shells, because you cannot. The brand is not going to scale. We can scale non-brand to a certain extent as well. So always try to separate that. Not try, just do that. Always separate them out when you evaluate performance.
1,000% agree. Brand, non-brand, competitive, DSA, RLSA, like all these different themes, split it, and I recommend like everything should be looked at a different lens, and when you have massive global campaigns, like big, large accounts where you're running in multiple regions, and it's like you just have too many active campaigns, this is where that segmentation by theme is really helpful, because now you can report at theme level. So for example, I might have 20 brand campaigns, I might have 50 non-brand campaigns, 40 competitive campaigns, instead of now like first reporting at the individual campaign level, which is going to take forever. I can report at the theme level, and I can monitor my progression and my performance by the theme, and then I can double click. So I can be like, overall non-brand is at X, brand is at Y, competitive is at Z. And then if you have a segmentation by region, you add that filter, And then you can like kind of drill into it to your point, right? Because it's just complete. It's like apples, oranges, and bananas. Like they're not, they're not the same
Exactly.
thing.
Exactly.
100%. Okay, so we just wrapped tip number 10. Davies, I think you've got a bonus tip for everybody.
Yes, it's something that makes sense to look at when you target like Europe as a whole. So it's about location targeting, location tracking, and reporting. So often what happens is you target like the whole EMEA, and there's a bunch of countries there, and in a lot of cases, like some of those countries are eating a lot of budget. So especially when the CPCs are different. So if you target Nordics and DACH region and UK all together, naturally UK, DACH, and Nordics have higher CPCs than South Europe, so France, Italy, Spain. And what happens is, of course, depending on the whole volume, but what happens is Google starts to buy way more of that, like South European traffic, which is in a lot of cases not converting that well. But maybe there is, maybe they are. It could be that maybe nobody's converting in Nordics, or maybe nobody's converting in the DACH. What I'm trying to say is, don't ignore the countries within the campaigns, and try to evaluate the spend and look at what's happening, not only on lead conversion, but what's happening throughout the journey. What we recently did for one of our clients, we actually cut out all of the Europe and only kept UK, because some of them, like a lot of these countries, were generating like form submits. But when we looked at the past like 18 months, none of them were a client. Nobody converting to be a client. So why should we invest? And we ended up saving quite a lot of money on that. So that's just an additional tip here.
That's awesome. Everybody, if you guys haven't gotten value, I don't know if you've been listening to this episode, just to do a quick recap of all the tips that Deivis has shared today. Number one is quality conversion tracking, making sure that you're feeding the machine, the signals as much as you can based on your life cycle stages. Pro tip, go to Upwork, outsource it. Like it's got to get done. It's just one of those things you have to check off the list, but it's well worth checking off. Number two is consolidation. I love this. Like you cannot, like it's not necessary to have 1,000 variations of campaigns, unless there's like some extenuating circumstance. But generally speaking, consolidation is the way to go. Number three was all around exclusions. Make sure you're checking that search terms report. You're excluding all of the junk that is coming through, especially now that like Davies talked about, exact, it's not exact. Tip number four is fast and relevant landing pages, and just getting started with like an MVP. So instead of stressing over analyzing, like what are you doing right now? And then how can you just duplicate that existing page, make some modifications to it so you have a starting point, and then based on the 80-20 rule, you're able to make your adaptations and adjust as you need to. Tip number five was to go ahead and leverage smart bidding as much as possible. I think we had like a little mini podcast just on this tip around like different ways, and like there was tons of like nuggets around like if you have conversion constraints, you can use portfolio bid strategies. We talked about like using target CPA caps. All that's definitely worth a re-listen just on tip number five. Tip number six was to chill out with the amount of RSAs per ad group. This was a really good one, one that I haven't thought about too. And this is all around making sure you have enough volume of testing based on the variations of ads. Tip number seven was all around pinning and doing the 3x3 method. So making sure you have different things depending on the different positions. So position one, that you're really focusing on matching search intent with the keyword that's related to what's being appeared. Position number two is all around the USP. And then position three is the CTA. Tip number eight was all around, don't forget device adjustments, depending on your depending on your circumstances. It might make sense to use device adjustments. So go ahead and use that. Tip number nine was to consider for yourself if you should bid on brand or non-brand. And we also talked about potentially running out like a holdout study or a incrementality study on certain regions to kind of verify that for yourself. And then tip number 10 was to always report on brand versus non-brand separately. It's like apples and oranges. Make sure you're looking at the campaign themes in isolation because they are very unique. And then finally, the bonus tip was to leverage location targeting and dive deeper into the geos and understand your performance by country. I totally love this tip because oftentimes, especially from the US, you're like, oh, Europe is Europe, and it sounds so ignorant to say that, but that's the truth. And on the flip side, like people who target the US that are not from the US, they're like, California is the same as Florida. And it's like, no, it cannot be any more different. And like the same is true in the US. Like there are certain states that probably perform a lot better than other ones. And there might be an opportunity to create that segmentation. Deivis, this was awesome. If people want to connect with you, where can they find you?
LinkedIn, just LinkedIn.
Awesome. So go ahead and connect with Deivis on LinkedIn. And if you guys are looking for ad support, definitely check out DERU Digital. He is also helping SaaS companies. So if you guys need help with that, check him out. We'll plug that in the show notes. Deivis, thank you so much for being here. Everybody, if you're not subscribed already, please do so. And we'll see you in the next episode. Take care.